Good evening. This is Anne-Marie Ibiabor with your True Talk International Weekly News Update. Let's take a look at some of the key stories making headlines around the world today. The United States has imposed sanctions on a top UN official. Francesca Albanese, the UN Human Rights Council's Special Rapporteur on Palestine, has been sanctioned by the US government. Albanese is an outspoken critic of Israel's military campaign in Gaza and has repeatedly accused Israel of violating international law. Washington has justified the sanctions by accusing her of bias and disinformation, but rights groups say the move undermines the independence of the UN and sends a chilling message to other international watchdogs.
Francesca Albanese, a special United Nations rapporteur and human rights lawyer, has long been a fierce critic of Israel's conduct in Gaza and US-backed plans for Palestinians in the enclave.
Is inciting to commit forced displacement, which is an international crime. Forced displacement and further dispossession, and in the context of a genocide, I mean, it will strengthen the complicity in the crimes that Israel has been committing.
Albanese made that remark in February after US President Donald Trump proposed a plan to force Palestinians trapped in Gaza into neighbouring countries, a move that was welcomed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. 5 months later, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced on social media that he was imposing sanctions on Albanese, accusing her of illegitimate and shameful efforts to prompt international criminal court action against US and Israeli officials, companies and executives. That her campaign of political and economic warfare against the US and its allies will no longer be tolerated. Actions that came just a few days after the UN human rights expert called on countries to cut ties with Israel's, quote, economy of genocide.
In the past 20 months, while the Israeli army, and accompanied by settlers, was devastating Palestinian lives and landscapes, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange soared by 213%, amassing over 220 billion in market gains, including 76.8 billion US dollars in the past month alone. So clearly, for some, genocide is profitable.
The sanctions will likely prevent Albanese from travelling to the UN headquarters in the US and block any assets she has in the country. Albanese says it's a mafia-style intimidation technique and that she stands firmly and convincingly on the side of justice.
The International Court of Justice has concluded the occupation is unlawful. So you see, there we have a clear court decision by voting through their wallet. So stopping and putting your money, your saving in banks that refuse to unplug from supporting an economy of occupation which has turned into genocide.
While Washington's latest move is widely seen as an attempt to punish critics of Israel's actions in Gaza, Francesca Albanese vows, like her predecessors under the Rome Statute, that she will not be silenced. Christina Simic, TRT World.
First, in the US, a new wave of protectionist policies is making headlines. President Trump has announced a 50% tariff on copper imports, expected to take effect immediately, and he's warned that pharmaceutical imports could face tariffs of up to 200% after a year-long transition period. The move is a part of a broader effort to revive US manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. But critics argue it could spark retaliatory trade measures and push up prices for everyday goods.
President Trump is imposing new tariffs. He says copper imports will soon face a 50% levy, just like steel and aluminum. Trump also warned tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals could be coming soon as well. The president is expected to announce additional trade news today as well. You're looking at a post from the social media account last night suggesting at least 7 countries will receive tariff letters today, either announcing new rates or deals. Nancy Cordes joins us at the White House with more on all of this. Nancy, good morning to you. What do we know about this copper tariff and when that might go into effect?
Well, the president and his aides say that that is coming shortly, that copper will be added to the list, like steel and aluminum, of materials that are taxed at 50% when they are imported into the United States. And that's a big deal because the U.S. imports about 50% of its copper, which is used to build things like electric vehicles and military equipment. Some of our biggest exporters of copper are Chile and, of course, our neighbor to the north, Canada. And this 50% came as kind of a shock to the industry. They expected that President Trump was going to start taxing copper at a higher rate. They didn't anticipate that it would be quite this high. It drove up the price of copper to an all-time high, and we're still waiting to see when exactly this new rate goes into effect, but the president said it's going to be soon.
And the when, I guess, is an important piece of this as well, because we've been having challenges keeping track of the other tariff deadlines. The president now says there will be no extensions past August 1st. But August 1st itself was an extension from Wednesday's deadline. So what are you hearing from the White House on why that appears to be moving?
It appears to be moving because the president reserves the right to change his mind at any time. He says that if he hears something from a country right up close to the deadline or even after the deadline, he could always change his mind, change their tariff rate. But there are some really big questions hanging out there right now. The president sort of in an offhand manner yesterday said that he might be imposing a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals sometime soon. And that's something that, as you can imagine, rattled the industry yesterday quite a bit.
Yeah, indeed. Nancy Cordes, great to see you. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Now, as we discuss regularly, these new tariffs come with real costs for American consumers, from higher prices at the checkout to broader impacts on the economy. Market Watch reporter Layla Maiden is here at the CBS Broadcast Center with more on that angle of it all. Good morning, Layla. Great to have you with us. Thanks for waking up early. Maybe you get up at this time usually, but thanks for being here. What is the real-world effect from what Nancy just laid out? This president has said he can change these rates whenever he feels like it, but businesses need to plan. So what are you seeing?
Well, when it comes to things like tariffs on copper, this is a metal that's used all across the economy. We're talking about data centers, which is a big deal for the tech industry. We're talking about electronics, things like even iPhones, although they use recycled copper. When the price of copper goes up, it affects all of these products. And we're talking about the construction industry as well. This is residential, commercial, all of the things that are necessary for the U.S. economy. So it's really difficult to put a price on, how much this impact can be, but we know it's widespread. And this tariff on copper is on top of aluminum and steel already, which goes into a lot of the same products that we already correct, specifically electronic EVs. Especially things like Tesla, batteries, all of these things combined. And I think the American consumer has an understanding that some of these costs will be picked up by them. As much as companies try to spread that out between their supply chains, not all of it can be absorbed by the company.
Well, I want to ask you more about that specifically, because according to this new Yahoo Finance Marist poll, 80% of Americans believe that they have concern about the impact of Trump's tariffs on their personal finances. Might that, you see the stats on the screen, lead to less spending?
Yes, absolutely. Anytime there's economic uncertainty in the future, the consumer becomes concerned, and so they start saving. And it's not only in the goods that they want to buy as well. We also think about inflation, which the economic outlook this year has inflation going up to potentially 3% because of tariff costs. And then there's also the concerns of when companies have to take on increased costs, they try to cut costs elsewhere, and that could come in the form of jobs, less jobs, even potential layoffs. So there's all of these things that are combined that are creating this economic uncertainty. Consumers also rush to buy vehicles in the beginning of the year out of fear that tariffs would increase the cost of vehicles as well. So we saw that spike. So we do see the American consumer thinking about how tariffs are going to impact them, buying things in advance, and then now holding on to money as we enter this period. I mean, essentially, August 1st looks like a good deadline.
Yeah.
You know, even though it got extended. We're in a period now of uncertainty, so that uncertainty just got pushed ahead a little bit more.
Well, if our viewers are worried, they've got company at the very least. Layla, Maiden, thank you so much for coming in today.
Now to Mexico City, where rising tensions are putting cultural divides in sharp focus. The city has seen an influx of wealthy foreign residents, especially Americans, who are relocating in record numbers. But not everyone is happy. Long-time locals are pushing back, blaming the new arrivals for gentrification, skyrocketing rents, and rising food prices in traditional neighborhoods. Angry slogans like "Gringo Go Home" and "Speak Spanish or Die" have been spotted on walls across the city, and social media is fueling a growing backlash. Critics say the newcomers are pricing out working-class families and reshaping the city without regard for local culture or community needs.
These protesters in Mexico City say cross-border migration is changing their country's capital for the worse. Over the last decade, an influx of mostly American so-called digital nomads have moved here to work remotely and also enjoy a cheaper cost of living. Protesters say the newcomers have driven up rents beyond the reach of locals.
If they're going to live in a country, they have to contribute to that country. The first and simplest issue is legal migration. They come here with visas or no visas, and still the change in purchasing power generates these problems of gentrification and displacement.
I'm here because gentrification is just one more step towards colonization, dispossession, and the exploitation of our resources. Right now it's about the people, but it won't be long before they run out of oil, water, or lithium in other countries and come and take them from us.
Many Americans in Mexico are able to still receive high salaries in dollars from U.S. companies by working on laptops from their apartments.
The government is directing its public policies towards people with higher purchasing power, often illegally displacing local populations who have lived in these neighborhoods for 40, 50, and we have even documented cases of up to 60 years. In 5 years, rents have increased by 47%. This is violent for the local population. We are debating whether to pay for electricity, water, or food. Of course, we choose to eat.
Some activists blame Mexico's government for encouraging them. However, there's no simple fix. Imposing tougher visa restrictions on Americans could worsen relations with the U.S. Mexican citizens in the U.S. also send billions of dollars in remittances back to their families in Mexico. In a world where travel and communication are faster and easier than ever, these two nations are finding it harder to have neighborly relations. Wilson Dysard.
In the United States, a tech giant has just made history. NVIDIA, the artificial intelligence chip maker, has become the first company ever to hit a $4 trillion market value. The milestone comes after a dramatic rebound in Wall Street tech stocks in recent months. NVIDIA's stock price alone has surged more than 40% since early May. Analysts say two key factors help push it over the line: a diplomatic fall in the US-China trade war, signaled by President Donald Trump, and a wave of multi-billion-dollar chip deals in the Middle East. With demand for AI infrastructure booming, NVIDIA now leads the pack ahead of Apple, Microsoft, and even Amazon in shaping the digital future.
I mean, to some extent, yes. NVIDIA plays a big role in the market, especially the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. Those are very tech, or NASDAQ's very tech heavy, plays a big role if you are invested in your 401k in an S&P index fund. But really, this is about the belief that investors have in the AI development over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, we have talked about NVIDIA. It is the building blocks when it comes to AI. They make the chips that power everything. So when you take a bet on NVIDIA as an investor, you don't have to predict who is going to, quote, win the AI race. You just have to predict that there is going to be an AI race and demand for those chips. And of course, NVIDIA has pretty much a lock on the market.
In South Africa, healthcare workers are raising the alarm over a possible rise in HIV infections as US aid cuts begin to bite. The sudden closure of US aid-funded clinics has left thousands of HIV-positive patients, many of them sex workers, in a precarious situation. Gugu, a former sex worker and now a project coordinator for an NGO, says she was able to get a 9-month supply of medication before her clinic shut down. But many others were not so lucky. The cut ordered earlier this year by President Trump has not only affected access to life-saving antiviroids, but also halted progress in vaccine research and community support services. South Africa has the world's highest number of people living with HIV, more than 7 million, and experts warn that without urgent intervention, decades of progress could unravel.
There could be 6 million new HIV infections and 4 million more AIDS-related deaths globally by the year 2029 due to the sweeping aid cuts by the US. That's according to the UN, which is releasing a report on global HIV infections today, its first since the cuts took effect. It's being announced in South Africa, the country with the highest number of people living with HIV and home to the world's leading HIV researchers, whose work could be set back years as a result of the US actions. Here's our Africa correspondent, Mayeni Jones, in Johannesburg on the global impact it could have.
A lifeline for thousands. This private clinic in northern Johannesburg used to receive USAID funding. We visited when the cuts were first announced, and some of its patients were anxious about their impact.
Firstly, when I was sick without the clinic or attending the clinic, my life was so bad. Since I get the treatment from Vetkopen Clinic, I'm fine. I'm fine.
These are some of the stories shaping global conversations this week. For more headlines, deep dives, and expert perspectives, stay tuned to True Talk. I am Anne-Marie Ibiabo. Thanks for listening.
Good evening and welcome to Weekly News Update on Total Cardio 98.5 FM. With me, Mariama Kalmamaya. On Tuesday, 8 July 2025, President Bill don launch $180 million water and sanitation project wey go benefit 4 million Salon people with support from the World Bank. Under the theme, Securing Water, Enabling Dignity, and Advancing Development. This project go reach 90% water and sanitation hygiene coverage across the country through one multi-phase approach. Where they give keynote statement, President Bill say access to safe water now one human right and are the foundation for development. And promise say the new water and sanitation hygiene program go help end the suffer wey pikin there, woman there, and community then they go through.
My government is guided by the belief that access to safe water and sanitation is not a favor extended to just a few people, but a fundamental right guaranteed to all. The launch of the Sierra Leone multi-phased programmatic approach for water, sanitation, and hygiene is an investment in our people, our public health, our environment, and future prosperity. Multi-phase programmatic approach provides a coherent and result-driven roadmap, carefully structured in 3 progressive phases to reach 4 million people by 2035 and to achieve 90% national wash coverage. As a government, we believe that no child should walk miles like I did to fetch water before going to school. Water is not only life, but water is progress, and water is everything.
Residents then at the Donda States don't talk about how the heavy rain can disturb them, and then they call on Freetown City Council for help make them get better drainage.
You attack the flop take the Kaisa will shop set. I make the government will pay like drainage chef. They make the drainage because the drainage is too small. All this time I got we attack the floor, and it's running there. Pass will lock the shop. I'm not going to get a chance for pass will lock the shop first. Say the rain cut off, the shop. Back home. At the time they attack the Kaisa, they are afraid to pass through the system, all the system. So after the rain, whip back fresh. So they attack the country, go inside the compound, and all is cinnamon.
We can add a dua or two. Who knows? That might be the time
they are already
may be accepted.
That the drainage chef,
they are acceptable and accepted at all times.
Well, it affects me so much in such a way that the streets are just flooding and the streets so problem. So inside the whole the way we buy them, we were attacking all the things about it. The whole the way we buy them, don't know whether a good side or a bad side. So sometimes, even if I see one of them ask, like what's up? I can tell us what to do as in at the road. So like what people who sign at the good side, who sign at the bad side. Well, we don't go to our government and city council to let them help because as for the mere fact that we all are bike riders and we are citizens of the country. And at the same time, we have to pay with tax. These are things they in place for the government to work for. I compare because they pay with tax. Members they are all the rights. So anyone all the people that from all the ride on the street, we must buy license. So before ever we ride on a city, we must buy license, and then if us don't give permission or follow the ride. Because of that, so government for the good thing of them.
When the race starts, let me say 5 to 10 minutes, once you know the pass and all that street, maybe Motuka, if you say the pass automatically, the water get problem. Yeah. So that's one of the big problems and the challenge of getting at that street. But I mean, this not a city council no more, city council and government.